Today I'm going to be describing my most recent work entitled The Sacrifice, which I have right here on my shelf. And I've recently been working in this type of media where I take paper and glue them to 3D printed frames that I stack on top of one another to produce what I would best describe as just like a mixed media diorama. Whatever you call it, I had a lot of fun making this. So today will hopefully be the first of many videos where I describe my work and my process. So let's get into it. What you're seeing here is the video output of the sketching phase of this project, which was completed with the Procreate app on the iPad Pro. I really love this app and I highly recommend it. I downloaded high-resolution images of some dollars and just began erasing the outlines of shapes and moving them around. And as I was working, it transformed into a kind of sacrificial altar, which has a lot of obvious symbolism, and for me it really comes down to the sacrifice of my time for money. I also tried to be careful with the dimensions initially, where I used calipers to measure the box and then set a ratio of about 10 pixels to a single physical millimeter. This LEGO gear system was the result of multiple iterations to get the physical profile and feel that I wanted. Initially, I wanted to have a gear reduction setup so that multiple revolutions of the hand crank would result in just one rotation of the final spiral. But it kept being clunky and took up too much room in the box. I did find an alternative solution, which you'll see at the end of the video. I also wanted to have the hand crank outside of the box, so I needed to drill a hole that was aligned to the LEGO mechanism to insert the rod of the hand crank. At first I was going to try to make a series of internal and external measurements to ensure that I drilled the hole in the correct spot. But then I realized one of the benefits of LEGO is I could quickly make a guide and use it to mark where the hole should be without taking any measurements. I already drilled this hole off camera, but here is a quick demonstration of how the guide was used to make the hole in the box. Now for just a quick check to see if everything is easy to connect and make sure it all works before I move on. Looks good to me. Now we need to move into Illustrator to make the vectors of the shapes I will be using with precise dimensions. What I'm showing initially is one of the two right angles that I'm placing in opposite corners of the dollar bill image, which will be critical for aligning the physical dollar bill to my laser cutter in later steps. Next, I use the pen tool to draw outlines of shapes that I will be using for both laser cutting and 3D printing. Once again, I had to measure the exact width and length of a dollar and apply the appropriate pixel to millimeter ratio so that the shapes I'm making in this program will match the exact scale when I'm actually working with real dollars. With the vectors isolated in a single Illustrator file, I can then import them into my laser cutter program. In order to prepare for laser cutting the dollars, first I need to flatten them as best as I could. And it seems like a quick spritz of water followed by a hot iron worked really well. During this project, I learned an interesting fact about currency in that it's not actually made of paper, it's in fact 75% cotton and 25% linen. So you kind of know what the appropriate heat settings are for your iron. You do get some curling, but the wrinkles are basically gone. Then I taped the dollar to a large tile that I have, which I use as the backing for the laser cutter. This video went relatively smoothly, but taping a bill down flat is actually more difficult than I thought it was going to be. There are these irregular bows in the material that you have to contend with, and at some point you just have to say, that's good enough. Here I am, aligning the dollar to the laser cut space. So I repeatedly position the laser to the corner right angle references I spoke about earlier. After I position it as best as I can, I'm ready to put on the eye protection, change the power setting, and then run the cut path. I do about 2 passes of the laser to ensure that it cuts through, but it's probably overkill. Here is a close-up of the cut that I just made, and you can see that it's quite precise considering I have what is considered to be a low-end laser cutter. Alternatively, I could have just used an X-Acto knife, but it would have taken much longer. Getting back to Illustrator, I begin the design of each layer to be slated for the 3D printer. So with these cutouts I just made with the laser printer, I will be able to copy and paste in those vector shapes, which will be used for the legs of the table. Just using the shape builder here to make a single connected shape, which I will then export as a .svg file. I've tried a few different free CAD softwares in the past with varying levels of success, and recently I discovered that Tinkercad, which is a free web-based CAD software, really works well for what I needed to do. I'm printing each frame at a depth of 2 millimeters. Then I have to export the 3D model as a .stl file, which can be imported into a 3D slicer program called Cura, which I then export as a .gcode file that my 3D printer accepts. After about 45 minutes, my 3D print is complete, and then I can remove it from the print bed. It's really easy to get the knife underneath to pop these suckers off. Now it's time to clean up the print edges with some hand files and sandpaper. To ensure that I have a snug fit, I set my print dimensions in such a way that I actually have to file and sand it down a bit so it fits correctly. You can always sand down, but you can never sand up. Is that a saying? Probably not. Definitely not, I should say. But you know what I mean. Once the 3D printed frames are cleaned up, I can glue down the cutouts using plain old Elmer's glue. I should probably experiment with some other glues, maybe some finishing sealers or something. I think the end result could be more robust, but that's for future me to figure out at a future time. Anyways, we're up to the part of the video where all the parts are laid out and the pieces are assembled. I discovered as I was building the layers and needed additional support and spacing for the Legos, I designed a bracket that fit around it. And because I didn't account for that at the beginning, the spiral actually was starting to graze the original bracket that I designed. So I made a newer version that have these small windows on the side that allows for the spiral to pass through. And there it is.